We're only 2 weeks into the season, but the Seahawks are in sole possession of first place in the NFC West, and that's creating quite a bit of interesting chatter out there. There's some overreactions already on the horizon. We're going to be diving in on a jam-packed Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined as always by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, whether you're nearby Bellevue, Washington, or you're overseas in Paris, France. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks, one of the handful of 2-0 teams on the NFL standings right now, and they are the only one that's still undefeated in the NFC West in sole possession. And of course, when you're in sole possession of the divisional lead, even at this stage of the season, there's going to be plenty of exciting rumors and exciting speculation that's going to be flying out there. And that leads to overreaction. So here we are now going into week 3. And Rob, you and I are going to dive into a number of reactions that we are seeing regularly from fans or media experts right now. And we're going to dive in and say whether it's an overreaction or it's right on. And I've been looking forward to this all day. Let's get to our first one. Gino Smith has earned a new contract with his play in the first 2 games. Overreaction or right on?
Oh, I think it's right on. I think that the way that Gino Smith has played over these first couple of games absolutely deserves the conversation about extending his contract. That said, I don't think this is something that you want to have at this point in the season, but still, Gino Smith has been spectacular. He has been playing at MVP level, in my opinion. So I think that that there's no question about it. That Gino Smith is the single biggest reason, with all due respect to the coaches, all due respect to some of the other players on their squad, Gino Smith is the single biggest reason why the Seahawks are, as you said, in first place in the NFC West division.
Yeah, I'm going to go right on this one too. In fact, I'm going to go as far as saying get this deal done as soon as possible. And I don't think it's a distraction. I think the locker room is going to be fired up if they find out that Gino Smith has had his contract extended. And he's already got a lot of money on the table next year. And why not just make it that money is a down payment guaranteed next year, and then add a couple years to his contract? He looks like he is firing on all cylinders in this offense, and he has taken another big step forward. So, yes, absolutely, get it done. I a couple weeks ago was already thinking it made some sense. I think this is one of those rare instances where I know he's got 2 years left in his deal, but it makes a lot of sense for both parties, in my opinion, to make this happen. He looks fantastic in this offense. Next one, LAC Tomlinson, not Anthony Bradford, should be the one benched to gains. A overreaction or right on?
See, for me, this is the overreaction. And I certainly understand. I mean, because anybody who watched either the game live or the tape since the Seahawks victory against the New England Patriots are going to recognize the fact that Keon White, and as productive as he was against the Seahawks, that a lot of that came against LAC Tomlinson at the left guard position. No, like Anthony Bradford has gotten a bunch of negative publicity. At the same time, Christian Haynes, the right guard position as well. That said, I think that LAC Tomlinson, deserves the benefit of a little bit of respect here. I really do believe that there are a handful of plays in which he struggled, and that there's a huge number of plays in which that he has been successful, both in path protection and in the running game. So for me, I certainly understand the concern with LAC Tomlinson. There's no doubt that he has struggled at times. But at the same time, I also don't believe that the Seahawks really have the bodies in place to be able to step in at that left guard position and be able to hit the ground running the way they do when LAC Tomlinson is playing.
I'm going to argue right on, but hear me out. I'm not saying that you bench LAC Tomlinson, but I'm saying if you are going to be subbing Christian Haynes into games right now, I would be doing it on the left side. And I mentioned this in the preseason. I just think Anthony Bradford is year 2. There's still been enough positive plays with him, and he's got a lot of room to grow. I think LAC Tomlinson is a stopgap guy. And I think that Christian Haynes could be your starter at left guard for the next several years with Bradford at right guard. I'd rather see what those two can do together for a handful of series a game than have Bradford be on the sideline and stunt the development a little bit for a young player. That's just my opinion. That's not necessarily even a shot at LAC Tomlinson. I'm just feeling like if that's how they want to get him on the field, that's how they should go about it, is get him on the left side. Our next one, the Noah Fant extension already looks like the worst move made this offseason. Overreaction or right on?
You know, after a fairly abysmal performance, let's be real, against New England Patriots, a couple of drop passes, a couple of missed blocks, I have to agree that this is right on at this point. Now, again, I would exercise a little bit of caution here. I mean, you're 2 weeks in, you know, and this was a game that, at least watching it, live on the telecast rather than being there in person, I feel like there was the sun was kind of creeping in. There were some kind of uncharacteristic drops from a number of players, both on the Seahawks and the Patriots. But there was no question about it. The Seahawks relied on Noah Fant at times in this last game, and he literally dropped the ball. And so, considering the fact that Seattle gave an awful lot of money, to Noah Fant, that both Kobe Parkinson with the LA Rams, Will Dissly with the Los Angeles Chargers have both performed well. Hell, the AJ Barner has performed well. That I do think that this is a move that looks a little bit dubious in retrospect.
I'm going to go with overreaction, but I'm not going to lie. I had to think this one over a little bit just because I feel like the drops yesterday were horrific. You re-signed Noah Fant to be a receiving tight end in this offense, and Gino Smith put the ball where he can catch it, and he dropped both of them. So he has not impressed early in this season, but I'm going to go with overreaction just because it's been 2 weeks, and he has had a toe issue, but that doesn't impact your hands. He's got to catch the football, and if this was a few weeks from now and he hasn't really turned things around, I mean, you're paying him $10+ million a year. He's got to be way better than what he has been at this point. Next one, Leonard Williams will be an all-pro playing in Mike McDonald's defense. Overreaction or right on?
No, again, I think this is a bit of an overreaction, but only because I don't know that Leonard Williams is going to create the statistics that are going to earn him actual all-pro votes. But my goodness, has he been terrific, especially in the critical moments. That's when he's been at his absolute best. That's the thing. There's so many good defensive linemen in today's NFL, partially because there's so many poor offensive linemen in today's NFL. But when you have your terrific moments at the most critical moments, that to me is what separates all pro. So yeah, I think that Leonard Williams is playing at an all pro level. I just don't know that he is going to be getting that national attention. It's kind of like similar to the conversation we just had a moment ago about Gino Smith. I don't know that there's enough national pundits. Maybe now it seems like there is a little bit of a people coming out of the woodwork right now in praising Gino Smith, and I question how many of them have actually watched every snap of the Seahawks 2 games the way that you and I have, of course. But Leonard Williams is playing at a spectacular level. That's why we were both very, very high on the fact that Seattle not only made the trade for him initially, but then brought him back on a fairly lucrative, agreement in this offseason.
I'm going to go right on. And the reason I'm going to is I think he can maintain the production we've seen these first couple of games in this defense. I've talked about it ad nauseum the last couple of months. Leonard Williams is one of those guys that you truly can move him all over the formation, and I think this defense accentuates his strengths really well. He's got 9 quarterback hits in 2 games. So this hasn't just been pressures. Like, he is literally getting to the quarterback and smacking him 4.5 times a game. I don't think he's going to maintain that pace, but I could see him getting 9 or 10 sacks in this defense with the way they're using him. And he has been so active, and I don't think they're overusing him. He played 75% of the snaps yesterday, but this is a guy that has consistently in his career played that number of snaps. So I'm going right on. I think if he gets to 9 or 10 sacks, and it feels like this year there's not as many dominant interior defensive linemen, at least these first couple of weeks. So I think that he has a chance to really be an all-pro in this defense. Last one, Robin. This is the one that you brought to the table. Devon Witherspoon and Woolen are a top 3 cornerback duo in the NFL right now. Overreaction or right on?
I do think that's right on. But also at the same time, I think you have to acknowledge the fact that you played against a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix, who has not yet in 2 games now in the NFL has not shown the ability to consistently pass the ball deep. And then, of course, a New England Patriots squad that, look, Jacoby Brissett's a solid quarterback, but the wide receiver position there, I think, is lacking a little bit. Very similarly, how the Miami Dolphins may have a great deal of talent. Of course, Miami being the next game on your schedule here, have incredible talent at the wide receiver position, but have some questions at the quarterback position now with Skylar Thompson rather than Tua Tagovailoa being the quarterback. So I think that the level of competition is weak. But at the same time, the just pure athletic ability, the size, the speed, the instincts that are Seattle's top 2 cornerbacks, I think speak for itself. So there's no question in my mind that they are top 3. Whether they're number 1, as some are grading them as after these first 2 weeks, to me, that feels a little bit rich. But I think that you're going to have some games here, again, against the Miami Dolphins, against the Detroit Lions in this couple of weeks, that you're going to have a truer test of what Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen can do.
I'm going to go right on. And I know the competition, you make some really good arguments, but also watching the film, like Jacoby Brissett wanted to take a few shots yesterday and he couldn't because the coverage was so darn good. Tariq Woolen has been glue ever since the start of training camp. He had a phenomenal training camp. Devon Witherspoon, I thought one of the penalties yesterday was ridiculous, but I think you take those out of the equation, the fact he came back at a tackle for a loss at the end of possession. He's a guy that always finds a way to make up for mistakes that he makes. I just think that these two are special. So this is right on for me. In fact, if you said top 2, I would have said right on this one. You can maybe make the argument at number 1, but we do need to see him against some elite quarterbacks to really make that kind of a statement. When we come back, we've got mailbag questions to answer, tons of them from our valued listeners. We're going to be tackling a number of topics on both sides of the football coming out of yesterday's win. Don't go away. You're listening to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. 1 Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on PrizePicks because when it's gone at the end of September, it's gone. For week 3, I'm going to be projecting a return for Ken Walker III to surpass 0.5 rushing, receiving combined touchdowns, and Gino Smith to surpass 235.5 passing yards on PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDINNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDINNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Football is finally back, which means it's time to order your favorite game day food, snacks, and drinks on DoorDash without missing a play. When I'm enjoying football Sunday with friends and family, there's nothing better than kicking it back with a gluten-free Jet City pizza, cinnamon sticks, and a 2-liter root beer as we cheer on our favorite team to victory. DoorDash makes it so easy to order our favorites, and we don't even have to leave the comfort of our couch or miss a key play. Use the promo code LOCKEDFALL24 for 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. Limited time offer, terms apply. Promo is not valid for orders containing alcohol. DoorDash, your door to game day greatness, your door to more. Download the DoorDash app now to order your game day favorites. Must be 21 or older to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol available only in select markets. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s that are listening in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Make sure to, for your second listen, to check out the new Locked On NFL with the madman Tyler Rowland and the barber himself, Tony Wiggins, for some real NFL talk. 2 shows a day. Add in the Locked On local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL. It's twice a day with the madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins. Make them your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. As we do every Monday, it's time to open up the mailbag. And Rob, we got tons of questions coming out of yesterday's 23-20 overtime win for the Seahawks in Foxboro. So without further ado, let's get to it. Our first one coming from Jason Y22 tweets, albeit 2 weeks, do we think JSN has officially surpassed Tyler Lockett as the de facto wide receiver 2 in Ryan Grubb's scheme?
I absolutely believe that. We talked about that before, Corbin, and we thought that JSN might wind up leading not only the Seahawks, but perhaps the entire NFC in receptions this season. And it's just the reliability of his route running. That, of course, has been the trademark of Tyler Lockett for so many years. But, Tyler Lockett's size has always been the negative. And it's one of the reasons why that his receptions have always been clutch, but they haven't necessarily been quite as consistent. Whereas JSN, it feels like he could be a 10+ target guy all year long. His ability to play inside and outside, his quickness, the soft hands, it is news now. Very similar to the way that was with Tyler Lockett. It's news now when JSN drops the ball. And so that, to me, is one of the reasons why I do believe that you are going to see JSN lead the team. Not only Tyler Lockett, lead DK Metcalf as well in receptions, quite possibly in receiving yards. But again, I think it's going to be number 14 who's going to wind up leading this team in touchdowns.
Next question coming from Ryan B. Katz tweets, kind of a general football question, but what's the thinking behind teams always trying to run between the tackles on 4th and short? Both of Seattle's recent attempts failed, and it seems like a quick pass to the margins would be more effective, especially with our O-line. I think that this is one of those things that it just depends on your personnel. I would not be doing this with Seattle's personnel right now. I have not seen consistent enough movement made up front. And Mike McDonald mentioned that in today's press conference. He was very blunt about what's wrong with the run game yesterday. Well, we're not moving people. No, they weren't moving people yesterday, particularly in the interior with their guards and center. They were not creating push. And that was obvious early in the game. So I was really surprised that was the play call the Seahawks went with on 4th and 1 and got stuffed, especially running behind the right side where they were not able to get any traction. Stone Forsythe did well in pass pro, in my opinion, but the run blocking was really a struggle for him yesterday. So that's really, in a nutshell, the issue. This team, they would have been better off just having Gino back in shotgun and just try to get the first down throwing the football than they would have been running it between the tackles. But there are other teams out there where that's their bread and butter. I just don't think, at least at this point, that is not Seattle's bread and butter at all. So I think it varies by team. I didn't necessarily agree with the play call either, just because I saw the lack of push they were getting up front. Next question from Matt G. tweeting, can you break down the first half of both games versus the second half? Clearly our coaching staff is adjusting well. Rob, I know last week we talked about Ryan Grubb's adjustments on offense in week 1. It actually felt like yesterday the adjustments that really were masterful were late in regulation and in overtime on defense after the Patriots had ran the ball really well in the third quarter, early fourth quarter.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth there, Corbin. I mean, again, in week 1, it really felt like a master class. And I got to give Ryan Grubb, Scott Huff an awful lot of credit for the adjustments that they made in the week 1 victory over the Denver Broncos, where Seattle looked just abysmal offensively in the first half, and then came out just on all cylinders in the third quarter. Had three scoring drives. Boom, 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 right in the third quarter that basically put that game away. On the defensive side of the ball against the New England Patriots, that's where I think the Seahawks deserve the most credit. It really felt like New England was starting to gain some momentum, especially in the running game. But then when it was at its most critical juncture, whether it be in run defense or whether it be in gain some pressure on Jacoby Brissett, I thought that's where they made some moves. And I got to kind of actually go take a step back. As I just said, I really want to give the defensive coaches, and this is obviously Mike McDonald, a great deal of credit, Aden Durr as well. But I thought that Seattle and Jay Harbaugh and the special teams deserves an awful lot of credit. That blocked kick was absolutely critical. The timing and execution of Seattle's offense to get in position to hit Jason Myers' field goal at the end of the first half to get that field goal, and obviously the game winner in overtime. Again, I thought was just beautiful execution. And when you consider the fact that all of these are new coaches working together with new players, that to me is the most exciting aspect about the Seahawks season so far.
Michael Xavier tweets, I found this interesting, but do you think Brady Russell could be the new Nick Bellore moving forward? He was in at fullback a few plays yesterday and is a solid special teams player. With his skill set, has Seattle found a role for the tight end? Yeah, look, I actually mentioned this in April or May that I thought Brady Russell would be a guy that maybe would be in contention to take that Nick Bellore role because we saw how good he was on special teams last year. But I didn't know that he was going to make this football team with some of the other tight ends that Seattle brought in. And yet we saw early that he was going to be much more effective on offense. And he had a really nice block on Zach Charbonnet's touchdown at the goal line yesterday. I love the fact that Ryan Grubb is adding him in as a back occasion. He's got the body type of a fullback more than a traditional tight end. He's more of that H-back build. And those guys, you can do a lot of fun stuff with formation-wise. I love it that he's putting him in the backfield in I formation. I mean, I can't remember Ryan Grubb ever running I formation at Fresno State or Washington. I mean, I could go back and watch every game, and I guarantee there was never an I form play in any of those 5 years as an offensive coordinator. And he's done it several times the last couple of weeks. And that's the adjustments playing a different level. I think at goal line situations, you got to have the ability to do that in the NFL. And Ryan Grubb's showing that. But Brady Russell is a really fun option there. And I think he's one of their three best special teams players right now on this football team. So I would go as far as saying get a few more snaps for him at fullback just because I'm a purist and I like it. It's looked good when they've done that in the last couple of weeks. So it seems like they are finding a niche for him where he can get some snaps on offense and he's still going to be a focal point on special teams. Walk and Grow tweets, what specifically does the O-line need to improve? This seems like kind of a wide open question after these first 2 weeks, Rob.
Well, I think two things. For one, you said the Mike Macdonald quote, they got to be better at moving people. I mean, that's certainly in terms of the interior, the three middle blockers, the two guards in the center, they've got to get better at just flat moving people, and we have kind of, kicked Seattle's guards a little bit, but Connor Williams as well. I mean, he was brought in for big time money and he was beaten a couple of times, both not only against Denver, but also against a New England squad that, given his experience, the Miami Dolphins last couple of years, he should know that the personnel, at least of the Patriots, that much better. So I think that was a little bit disappointing, but I also think that you have to take a step back and just recognize the fact that there's got to be a little bit of continuity at those positions. They've got to learn each other a little bit more. So I would just kind of say the phrase that Aaron Rodgers famously said a couple of years ago, just relax, just give this squad a little bit of time. That was a Denver Broncos squad a couple of weeks ago that is better at the front of attack than I think a lot of people are credit for. And there's no question about New England Patriots are better in that regard. And obviously that was a game in Foxboro where you had the crowd noise behind them. That was an amped up crowd in Foxboro, just given all of the different things that were going on in that particular game and their halftime ceremonies and things like that. So again, I think that is what the Seahawks need to improve on, the interior of the offensive line, but I also am encouraged by what I've seen so far.
And our last question here coming from Mauricio tweets, genuine question, what is Aden Durr's role with the team, with Mike Macdonald being the one who calls defensive plays in game? Listen, I guarantee that Aden Durr is getting an opportunity to have input on the play calling. I don't think he is just standing on the sideline. I'm sure Mike Macdonald, he ultimately is the one that's going to be making these calls, but I guarantee that Aden Durr is involved in that process, particularly when you're talking about calls for the defensive line, because that's where his background is at. And that's what he's probably doing most of the time in the game is he is working with the rotations for the defensive line. He is working with the play calling aspect. Really, you have a defensive line coordinator there is what you have. And there's a lot of teams that do that in the NFL. I think Mike Macdonald is leaning on all of these defensive assistants right now. From a play calling standpoint, this is an opportunity for Aden Durr to get his feet wet a little bit. And maybe down the line, he will be able to be the defensive play caller. Maybe Mike Macdonald eventually will give him that opportunity. I don't think that's going to happen this season, but he's at least going to give him a chance to get his feet wet a little bit. So I wouldn't think that this is like the movie Office Space and it's like, what is it that you do here? I don't think it's one of those kind of situations. I'm pretty sure Aden Durr is pretty busy on the sideline and is heavily involved with the game planning during the week too, to make those play calls when you get to Sunday. So a big role for Aden Durr, even if he's not the one that is spewing out the play calls into the mic. he is involved in that process. And this is really a internship of sorts for him to get ready for that opportunity to be a play caller, whether in Seattle or with another team. Up next, we're going to shift gears to our Monday Musings, in-depth takeaways coming out of the victory in Foxboro on offense, defense, and maybe some special teams talk as well. We'll be coming right back here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Game Time. You should never think about skipping a mortgage payment when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Want to see the Seahawks in their second home game against the Miami Dolphins on Sunday at Lumen Field? You can get seats in the lower bowl at one of the loudest venues in the NFL for under $75. Great seats without breaking the budget to see exciting young talent as the Seahawks look to stay undefeated against their latest AFC East foe. Game Time has deals on tickets right at the day of the event, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price to write your own memories. If you find tickets in the same section row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks improving to 2-0, the first time that a Seahawks coach has opened with 2 wins to begin their head coaching time in Seattle. Pete Carroll didn't do it. Mike Holmgren didn't do it. Chuck Knox didn't do it. Mike McDonald is 1 of 1, and he is still number 1 in winning percentage in Seahawks history at 100% with this 23-20 overtime victory over the Patriots. Rob, I know that you have been chomping the bit all day to talk about this game that really was an exciting one. I know that there's a lot of fans out there that were like, oh, not enough points or whatever. This was an old school slugfest, and I absolutely loved it. It lived up to the billing that Mike McDonald and Gerard Mayo really, gave out last week, that this was going to be a close, tight, physical football game. That's exactly what it was. And it was beautiful to see the Seahawks find a way to come out on top at the end of that game against a Patriots team that I think is going to win quite a few games this year. I was impressed with what I've seen these 2 games so far from them.
Yeah, I was as well. I think that, when the schedule first came out, I chalked this up for a Seahawks victory. I just thought, okay, the New England Patriots were not very good last year. They obviously invest their first round selection in Drake May at the quarterback position. Look, Jacoby Brissett's a solid veteran, albeit journeyman quarterback. Look, Ramondre Stevenson is spectacular. Running back, they've got some beef along both the offensive and defensive line, but who are their difference makers? The Seahawks, if they are any good, should be able to walk into Foxboro and get this victory. That was my mindset going into this game. And then over the past couple of days before the Seahawks and Patriots actually kicked off, I started watching more tape, and I was like, my goodness, the Patriots and the way they absolutely shut down that Cincinnati Bengals squad, this is a physically impressive, structurally sound, fundamentally clean football team.
Yep.
They are going to beat some people. And for the Seahawks to be able to match them punch for punch, strategy for strategy, again, considering that these were 2 brand new brand new coaching staffs with largely different rosters in terms of personnel as well. Corbin, I watch an obscene amount of football this week. I mean, whether it be the Thursday night game, the Friday night games, obviously all day long on Saturday with college football, and all of the Sunday games as well. And this was, in my opinion, the best played game on both sides of the football. I watched an awful lot of games where I thought that, frankly, neither team deserved to win. I thought that both teams deserved to win this particular football game. And so it's just a tip of the cap, I think, to Mike McDonald, to Aden Durr, certainly to Ryan Grubb, to Jay Harbaugh, as I mentioned before, and absolutely Seattle's players, not just the coaches. The coaches, I thought, called a beautiful game. There were adjustments throughout the game I thought were spectacular. Obviously, the players played well. The depth. I mean, how many games can you say in the past the Seahawks could lose a Ken Walker III, who obviously didn't play from the jump in this game? They were on the third string right tackle. Tyler Lockett basically was absent in this game. Noah Fant was essentially absent this game. No Uchenna Nwosu. Jerome Baker goes down, who was their best coverage linebacker, at least earlier in this game and in the Denver Broncos game. And not only did the Seahawks win, but they won. It's not in convincing fashion. Obviously, went to overtime, but it felt like they were in control of this game basically from the outset, that they were dictating the moves. They were the ones that were forcing the Patriots at home to call timeouts when they didn't want to. I thought that, again, the Seahawks earned this victory. I didn't think that they were going to be able to get this win when the game started to actually kind of play out, just because of how well prepared the Patriots were. But the Seahawks were even better prepared. They're the more talented team, and that's why they're heading into week 3 undefeated in first place in the division.
Yeah, the depth aspect has been very noticeable. And you can say what you want to say about Stone Forsythe and players like that. I mean, Stone Forsythe, I thought, played a pretty solid game yesterday, dealing with the Patriots edge rushers. Run blocking is never going to be a strength for him. The leverage issue, being 6'8", 6'8.5", that's always going to be a problem. But I thought in pass pro that he held his own, especially in the second half. I thought he did a nice job. I felt like on defense, the backups, I mean, Derek Hall had a really active game. You got to see a little bit more of Travis Gibson out there getting involved a little bit. Miles Adams played a few snaps. Tyrese Knight, I thought, played really sound football most of the time he was out there, his first extended action. It does feel like the depth on this football team is better than it was last year, really across the board, and they were able to withstand some of these injuries. I will say this, though, and I hate to be the pessimist, but somebody's got to be in this podcast relationship. Somebody's got to be the pessimist here. Listen, I'm a running back guy through and through, and I think Zach Charbonnet is a good player. But I'm going to throw this out there. We've heard the running backs don't matter mantra. Listen, running backs matter when you have Ken Walker III on your roster and he is suddenly not available. And we will never know how this would have played out if Ken Walker III played in this game. The blocking up front was not good most of the game. Charbonnet did not have much to work with. But there were a few plays there where I was watching on all 22, and I'm like, I think Ken Walker III has enough juice that he could have got outside here and picked up 20 yards. And Zach Charbonnet got 2. And that's not a knock on Charbonnet as much as it's just saying the juice, the athleticism, the explosiveness that Ken Walker III has, that suddenness, the underrated power. You got to see what that looked like yesterday, whereas if there were some plays that were blocked up fairly well, Charbonnet was able to fall forward and get 5-6 yards. He did that a couple of times. But if he had to try to create, he was not able to do that. Ken Walker III can. He is one of those few backs that has that electricity to be able to take something that looks like nothing and make it into a big play. And so I don't know how much that would have impacted the final score in this game, but I think that he absolutely would have given them a little bit more juice in the run game, just the way that things were blocked up because of that legitimate 4-3 speed. And so you can say running backs don't matter. I know there are cases where that argument has maybe a little bit of credence. With the Seahawks yesterday, though, it absolutely mattered with the way they were able to run their offense. And I think Ken Walker III, his athleticism, his burst, I think there were a few plays out there that he could have got significantly more yardage, and not necessarily a shot at Charbonnet. He's a 4-4 guy, but the difference between 4-3 and 4-4, and Walker just has the accelerator. Like, he's one of those dudes that can go 0 to 100. He's a Lamborghini out there. He can do that real quick. Charbonnet takes a little bit more time to get rolling with his caboose. So you noticed that yesterday with the way the blocking was set up. And I think that was probably, I would say it's a double-edged thing, because I do think the blocking was a big part of Charbonnet's struggles running under 3 yards per carry. But it also felt like there were some plays, man, Ken Walker III might have been able to do something with that. And there are not a lot of running backs you can say that about against NFL defenses.
No, absolutely. I think that that's a very valid point. There were so many times where I thought that Zach Charbonnet made one guy miss, but in doing so, he was slow enough that it invited the second and third defenders to be able to be in position to make the play. I will say the obvious exception to that was on the critical play in which he gets the first down that basically sealed the game for the Seahawks.
Yeah.
That little kind of dip and jump or hop over defenders, that was a critical play where it's not about speed, it's about awareness, it's about body control. And look, so while I would agree with you about that, the Ken Walker III has a different element of electricity than not only Zach Charbonnet, hell, most of the running backs in all of the NFL. At the same time, there are moments where he gets too cute behind the line of scrimmage where Zach Charbonnet just gets those 2 or 3 yards. At least in that particular instance that I mentioned before, when Zach Charbonnet was able to kind of roll over and get that critical first down for the Seahawks victory, I'm thankful, at least as a Seahawk follower, that it was Zach Charbonnet who caught that ball, and a terrific catch that it was at that. And to be able to just have the wherewithal to be able to kind of slide over and get that, rather than trying to get too cute and perhaps getting the 1 or 2 yard losses that we occasionally see with K9 that we very rarely see with Zach Charbonnet.
Let's shift gears real quick to the defensive side of the football. And it was a much more uneven performance, a lot more missed tackles. We certainly could continue to hammer the Seahawks defense about that because they left a lot of plays in the field yesterday. Didn't feel like they were swarming quite the same way they did week before. There were a lot of sacks left on the field in this game. Boy, Maffe's missed opportunity on Gibson that went from a negative play to a 45-yard run. I mean, there were certainly some plays that jumped out that were negatives, but I gotta just rave about Julian Love because the contract the Seahawks gave him is at this point already looking like a bargain when we're talking the top safety because he had 7 tackles, not as many as the week before, but 7 tackles, had a pass breakup. He blocked a field goal at the end of the game. So we're talking about a guy that's now a top 10 priced safety in the NFL, and he still cares that much about special teams. And you just don't see that a lot. I'm going to make the argument that this is the best safety group that the Seahawks have had since Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas last played together. And that's not taking a shot at Quandre Diggs, a healthy Jamal Adams before all the injuries. But as far as a cohesive unit, Rayshon Jenkins, going back watching the All-22, made several big plays, was sticky in coverage. Kayvon Wallace is doing things when he's in the game, and Julian Love is playing like an all-pro right now as one of the orchestrators of this defense. I don't think it's far-fetched, especially with the way they're taking away things in coverage. They've done it the first 2 games here. I don't think it's far-fetched. I'm not going to go as far as saying it's Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor. We know how amazing those 2 guys were. But in terms of a cohesive unit, this is as good of a safety group as the Seahawks have had really since 2017, in my opinion.
No, I agree with you. And again, I think that you have to throw out the obvious caveat is that level of competition at which you face at this point. But still, Julian Love has been, I think it's right there with Gino Smith as far as the best players on the field for the Seahawks. And so when we talked about before, we were slightly critical about, what was the worst move that the Seahawks made in the offseason. I think that you can make a strong argument that the best move was retaining Julian and not even that they had to, extending him, recognizing the impact that he had made for the Seahawks and extending him when you didn't have to. What a statement it made for the rest of the squad. And again, Julian Love is playing at an all-pro level for the Seahawks.